Welcome to Nice and Blunt. I'm Adam Riancho, and these are my wide receiver rankings for week 2. We're going to get into it in just a sec. First, the unranked players. We all know about Rashee Rice, Addison, Godwin, Ayuk, Coker, and McMillan. They weren't available last week, but I'm also not ranking Demarcus Robinson, who's suspended as well. Christian Kirk missed last week, so I did not rank him at the moment. I want to wait to see until he's healthy. And then Xavier Worthy, I am pessimistic, not expecting him to play. While he's questionable right now, the shoulder injury looked kind of serious. I don't expect him on the field for at least 1 or 2 weeks. He's not in my rankings this week. I also did not rank Juwan Jennings, but reportedly they're kind of optimistic he avoided a serious injury. There's a chance he suits up, but even without Brock Purdy, I don't know how much I want to trust him. Juwan Jennings is also unranked, so those players are not included. Let's get it going. In week 2, I am staying put with Ja'Marr Chase as my wide receiver 1 versus Jacksonville, a much better matchup, and typically Joe Burrow always looks like shit in week 1. This year was no different. I'm not going to panic on Ja'Marr Chase. We drafted him number 1 for a reason. He's staying as my top option in week 2. And number 2, we got CeeDee Lamb versus the Giants. And while he did have 4 drops against the Eagles, it definitely wasn't his best game. He still put up over 100 yards. The entire position was actually really bad last week. There were only 26 receivers that went over 12 fantasy points overall. And some of those players were guys no one was starting. Guys like Calvin Austin, Trey Tucker, Kayshon Boutte. A lot of guys no one was trusting actually had decent games. The receiver position kind of shit the bed in week 1. So Lamb was definitely one of the better ones. He's definitely a lock in your lineup every week. But Puka had an amazing week 1, really exceptional performance against a really tough matchup as well. The Texans defense had no answers. Puka was phenomenal. So while everyone panicked on Stafford late in the summer, it looks like that is a very big mistake. If you drafted Puka in the second round, whether it was on best ball or in your draft this year, it looks like you got one of the best options at the position. He's matchup proof. Puka is good to go, locked into the top 4 rest of year. He literally could finish as wide receiver 1. I wouldn't be surprised if that happened. At number 4, I'm going to keep Justin Jefferson in the elite tier. And although week 1 wasn't amazing, I did mention he really struggles on the road at Chicago without Jalen Johnson. He did find the end zone, and 12.8 points in J.J. McCarthy's debut when he looked like shit in the first half. I think it's only going to get better. We didn't get any comfort level and trust factor with any other receiver. It looks like they're going to lean on the run and also target Jefferson the most of any option. So I think J.J. McCarthy will improve. Once the nerves settled, he looked pretty good. After the pick 6, he was a completely different player. I think Jefferson will be the clear option. In prime time at home on Sunday night, I think Jefferson will be a very safe play. I got him in the top 4. This, I think, is the cutoff point for week 2, though, of the 4 names I trust no matter what. They're just matchup proof. I can't rank them any lower. These are the elite of the elite. But stepping in at number 5, I do have Nico Collins versus Tampa. Damn, rough game against the Rams. Maybe the Rams are just that good on defense, but it was really disappointing. Nico Collins has been very trustworthy, very matchup proof in the past, and he kind of shit the bed. So I'm willing to still trust him, but can't put him in that elite tier with the other guys I just mentioned. At number 5, though, he's also going to play in primetime Monday, and I definitely trust him. Nico should bounce back. This game is at home. I think Stroud will look way, way better against Tampa. Michael Penix looked pretty decent against them overall and only had 1 receiver in Drake London. So I think Nico will be just fine, but I just can't put him in that elite tier. I'm not expecting 20-plus points from Nico Collins. Next up at number 6, I got Drake London at Minnesota, who is questionable with a shoulder injury. Did exit last week's game a little early, but I don't think it's really a big problem. I think he'll be fine. It's a primetime game against the Vikings, and the Vikings are definitely tougher in the run defense than the secondary. So while they do have a good defense overall, I think London will be fine. Last week, what I was really encouraged about, even though he kind of let me down against Tampa, he was not a top 5 receiver as I thought. He did get 15 targets. That was the second most of any player in the NFL, only behind Hollywood Brown. So love that volume for London. Darnell Mooney looks to be returning this week, and then London banged up. Not ideal. But I was impressed by Michael Penix, and I think with the cannon he has, we're going to get a lot of deep passes that turn into big plays. I think London will be a volume monster all year. I think Drake London is a clear top 10 player rest of the season at receiver. I think he's locked in to high-end production. Love the volume he got in week 1. And number 7, I can't say I love the volume for Brian Thomas in week 1, but he still found the end zone, and I'm not going to panic over what was a strange game. The weather delay, I don't think just affected the Panthers. I think it also held the Jaguars back a little bit. Never ideal to deal with. So I am not going to get over concerned. While the Jags offense didn't look great, that matchup was definitely better on the ground than through the air. And JC Horn is somewhat legit. So I think this week at Cincinnati, all of your concerns will be proven wrong. I think he's going to look fantastic, and I think he's going to break open some big plays. At some point, Brian Thomas Jr. will look unguardable once again. So I trust him. I'm not panicking on him. I still have him top 10. And the matchup's an upgrade. I think he's definitely closer to top 5 this week than last week. It was a rough game. Even with a touchdown, only 8.5 points for Brian Thomas against the Panthers. Against the Bengals, should be much better. At numero 8, I have Malik Nabers at Dallas, who is technically questionable with a back injury, but he was dealing with that in the offseason. He was questionable up until the end of the week last week, and he'll be fine. I'm not worried about Nabers missing the game. However, I'm kind of worried about Russell Wilson. This wasn't a great showing for the Giants in week 1. Nabers did have 12 targets, so the volume we expected was there, but he only caught 5 receptions for 71 yards. That's a brutal catch percentage, and 71 yards is usable, but he didn't crack 10 points. When you get 12 targets, that's kind of hard to do. So I don't feel like Russell Wilson is the highest ceiling quarterback we can have in New York. Ideally, we have Jameis Winston, but at this point, I'm expecting Jackson Dart to probably get some snaps earlier in the season than expected. By the time this month is over, I think there will be some signs that Jackson Dart will be the quarterback pretty soon. I just don't trust Russell Wilson. And while I don't fully trust the Cowboys defense, they did lock up A.J. Brown and DeVonta Smith last week. Maybe it's tougher than I think. But Trayvon Diggs does give up some big plays on occasion. I still think Nabers' volume will carry him over the line. I'm not worried enough about Nabers to bench him. I don't think Russ is going to hold him back. Inevitably, Nabers will figure things out. I think he'll be okay. So he's still top 10, but maybe next week I rank him in the teens. Russ could be the problem, unfortunately. Next up at number 9, a player I think might be locked into the top 10 is JSN. Jaxon Smith-Njigba was fantastic against San Francisco in week 1. While Darnold, I don't think, has gained the trust of the coaching staff, only threw the ball 23 total times. 13 of those targets went to JSN. That's more than a 50% target share for this player. So he's locked into elite volume. And even if Seattle kind of struggles to score touchdowns, I think this yardage is pretty legit. He had 9 catches for 124 yards. And if we go back to last year, in 2 games when DK Metcalf was inactive, that's the situation this season, while Metcalf plays in Pittsburgh, JSN averaged 125 yards in those 2 games as well. He was elite from that standpoint. The volume is locked in, and I don't think the floor is ever going to dip below like 75 yards. That's going to be a really bad game if these trends continue. So I think JSN is matchup proof at this point. The volume is just so high, and I think once the touchdowns hit, JSN could have an elite ceiling. I think you may have had a league winner drafting him in the 3rd round. It looks like a steal. If week 1 is emblematic of what to expect, JSN will be a top 10 play for me every week. 13 targets, really valuable. Next up, I have Emeka Egbuka at number 10, and I think week 1 was legit. While maybe he doesn't score 2 touchdowns every time, I think the nature of Baker Mayfield's offense is going to rely on these receivers in the red zone, and I trust Egbuka to keep putting up points consistently. I also like that the tougher matchup is going to be on Evans. This week, Derek Stingley and the Texans are a big downgrade, but if you're getting the number 2 matchup in this situation, it's definitely not as bad. Last week, Adams was shut down, so maybe I'm incorrect. Puka was just fine, but I think if they can shut down someone, it would be the 32-year-old Evans a little bit. Evans was not as heavily targeted as we expected in week 1. So Egbuka shined. He looked kind of unguardable on both of his touchdowns. I don't think these trends are something to bet against. I think as long as Godwin is not on the field, the Buck's passing game is really valuable. Last year, all throughout the season, whether it was Godwin or Evans once Godwin was hurt, it sustained a top 5 receiver in fantasy. At this point, it looks like it's going to do the same, and I genuinely think Egbuka is more valuable than Evans. I don't think it's too early to say that. Egbuka's much younger. Egbuka looked great, and everything I've read so far, Baker loves him. He trusts him. He played all 4 years at Ohio State. He's a pro. He's ready to compete. Egbuka is my boy, and I am very happy I committed to him. In the subscriber league, I ended up paying $28, and based on how the draft shook out, in our auction league, that was the equivalent of a 3rd-round pick in a 12-team league. I thought I may have overspent. After week 1, I don't think so. I think I paid the perfect price on Egbuka. He looks like he may be a league winner. At number 11, I have T. Higgins versus Cincinnati, and similar to Jamar Chase, I'm not going to panic. Burrow always sucks in week 1, and Higgins is probably going to explode alongside Chase this week. So the touchdowns are coming. Not going to worry about it. The Bengals will figure things out pretty quickly. It probably happens this week against Jacksonville. The Jags don't scare you at all. Next up at 12, the last player in this tier, I do have Ladd McConkey at Las Vegas. And while he did not score a touchdown, unlike Keenan or Quentin Johnston, facing the Chiefs as the number 1 receiver is always a downgrade, never an easy matchup. Trent McDuffie can definitely lock you down. So the Chiefs tried to focus on Ladd. They gave up some other targets elsewhere, and it worked. The Chargers won. I don't think Ladd is a question to worry about. I trust him as the top receiver for Herbert, who looked amazing in week 1. I think there's a lot of upside in the Chargers offense. Ladd is locked in to a very high floor. And last time he played Las Vegas, week 18 last season, he had 8 targets, 5 catches for 95 yards. Even without a touchdown, that's 12 points. I think that's probably the floor for Ladd. He's going to be bust-proof. I trust him week in, week out. And once the touchdowns hit, the ceiling is pretty high. So love Ladd McConkey, love Justin Herbert. Top target in the Chargers offense is still Ladidi McConkey. Number 13, I think we are dropping down a tier, and I'm still starting these players, but these are my wide receiver 2s. I just don't feel as confident as I do the top 12. And at 13, you can't pretend like you're not a little worried about A.J. Brown, but the talent is too good to deny, and this week they get a Super Bowl rematch against the Chiefs. I think he'll bounce back. I can't imagine he only gets 1 target for the 2nd week in a row. So maybe last week was game plan specific. They also had a lot of success in the run game with Jalen Hurts. He kept both touchdowns to himself, and I just don't think the game script really ever needed A.J. Brown to step up. So in this game, that might not be the case. Maybe they trail in this one. Maybe they need to throw it a bit more. I think inevitably A.J. Brown will break open some big plays down the field. He's too hard to guard. But if this usage continues, I think he will get frustrated. I wouldn't be surprised if he's actually on the trade block if this is actually how they plan to use him. A.J. Brown will definitely fetch a good price on the trade market. I'm sure the Patriots would love to acquire him. So while I expect him to stay with the Eagles, I do have some worries. Last week was, some trends from last year that were concerning as well. I think he'll be all right. I'm still going to start him. But like I mentioned, you can't pretend like you're not a little worried with A.J. Brown. At wide receiver 13, though, I still think he's in the lineup. Top 15, I don't think you can bench, but he's not in that top 12 tier. That is concerning. At 14, I also have Amon-Ra St. Brown versus Chicago, and Amon-Ra was much better than A.J. Brown in week 1, but the overall red flags in the Lions offense are also a reason to pause, and I'm still telling you to start him. I have him top 15 as well. This is definitely not a player on your bench, but to pretend like you weren't a little worried after what you saw with Detroit last week would also be a lie. I'm willing to chalk it up to the Packers just being that elite on defense. Maybe that's all it was. But to pretend like losing Ben Johnson is not a relevant factor, to trust Jared Goff. Without Sean McVay, he looked like shit. Sean McVay kind of revived his career. And then with Ben Johnson, he remained looking good. But I definitely feel like Goff may have peaked. I don't think Goff is going to be the same player this season. So that's not ideal. Isaac Tesla vultured a touchdown. That wasn't a factor before. The situation in Detroit may not be as good as we thought. So similar to A.J. Brown, I'm dropping him down a tier, but not hitting the panic button all the way. I think he'll be all right, but I'm not convinced he scores a touchdown every week, and that's kind of what he needed last year to remain top 12. He was actually a little touchdown dependent last season, and this year they may not be available at the same rate. So a little worried about Amon-Ra, not going to lie, but not enough to bench, not just yet. At 15, I might be ranking Hollywood Brown way too low. Hollywood led all players in the NFL in week 1 in targets. He had 16 targets after Xavier Worthy went down. There are very few targets to trust in Kansas City. With Kelsey being 35 years old, he's just not going to dominate the target share like he once did. And other than Hollywood, the only other pass catcher they have is Juju Smith-Schuster. I think we might start to see Brashard Smith stepping up in the passing game soon. So I am 100% starting Hollywood Brown at wide receiver 15. I genuinely think I might be ranking him too low. But the thing about this matchup, Quinyon Mitchell can definitely shut you down, and it's just so obvious where the ball is going to go. I think this might be a bit of like a Sammy Watkins situation where week 1 was potentially a fluke, and you may get close to a bagel in week 2. This matchup is not ideal. Don't pretend like Hollywood Brown is matchup proof. So he's been injury prone in the past. He also had some drops in week 1 that should have made, but he also had some big plays. He put up almost 15 fantasy points in half PPR, and the volume is definitely coming back to him. So a must start. I do not expect Xavier Worthy to play at all this week, so I trust Hollywood. The volume is definitely there. He'll be a top 20 play for sure. A good wide receiver 2. You probably got off the waiver wire just this morning. At number 16, we got Mike Evans at Houston, and I am fearful of the Derek Stingley matchup, but not enough to fully fade Mike Evans. He's still a top 20 play, and last week he had 7.6 points. Egbuka scored 2 touchdowns. Odds are it's going to be more like 1 touchdown apiece for both options. So if you give Evans one of those touchdowns, now he's up to 13.5 points. That's probably what I'm expecting from him this week. I think he will get in the end zone. In prime time, I think the Bucks put up a good offensive game plan here, and they score a lot of points. Give me Evans as still a top 20 play, even with Stingley lined up opposite him. At number 17, we got Garrett Wilson versus Buffalo, and I'm not going to pretend like I fully trust Garrett Wilson. I didn't put him in the top 12, but I was tempted to. He looked really good in week 1, and there was literally no other player that caught anything from Fields in the Jets offense. Like we expected, the volume is locked in, so I could argue I should be ranking him right alongside JSN. I mean, he had a better game in week 1 than JSN, but he did score a touchdown, and I do think JSN's a bit more trustworthy. JSN was only 4 points behind Garrett Wilson, did not find the end zone, and also fumbled. JSN, I think, is more of a safer bet than Garrett Wilson. So I would like to see Justin Fields do it again. I'm not fully buying in that he's an elite passer all of a sudden. I think the revenge game also factored in as well, and their offense I don't expect to look as elite every single week. They're not dropping 32 points on everyone. So I think Garrett Wilson is a must start after the week 1 performance. The volume is definitely there, and he may remain in the top 20, but there's still a part of me in the back of my mind that's like, this is not the safest bet. There's a chance he burns you. Wouldn't be shocked if he gives you less than 5 in week 2 against Buffalo. But I looked up the stats for Garrett Wilson against the Bills in 6 career games. He does average 12.6 points, just under 8 targets per game. I would expect more in this matchup. For 6 catches, 66 yards. And on the bright side, in his last 4 games, he has also scored 3 touchdowns. That is a good trend. He's been way more productive in the red zone against Buffalo specifically over the last 2 years. So I think he'll find the end zone in this one. I think he'll be a good start. I think he's a clear top 20 option in week 2. Number 18, I have Courtland Sutton at the Colts, and I think he's also a clear top 20 play. He was just like last year, basically the exact same expectation for Courtland Sutton. 9 targets, 6 catches, 61 yards. Never going to burn you with like a 150-yard game. That's just not what he offers. But he also found the end zone, and especially with the injury to Evan Ingram, it's pretty guaranteed Sutton is not going anywhere. He's the clear number 1 target for Bo Nix when they look to score a touchdown. So love Sutton. I think the floor is very safe every week. He's never going to burn you. And I think from just a safety standpoint, at worst, he's a flex play. I think Sutton has to be in your lineup. He's been really, really consistent. Not just last year, but the year before when he had 10 touchdowns. He was also a very safe option in fantasy. I think the touchdowns will continue. I would expect at least 8-10 touchdowns for Sutton this year once again. Next up at 19 and 20, I have the two Commanders receivers back-to-back, Terry McLaurin and Deebo Samuel, on the road at Green Bay on Thursday night. So I'm telling you to start both of them. Last week was kind of rough for Terry McLaurin, but I did tell you to fade him. I did have some concerns, and last year's trends against the Giants did repeat. He failed to go over 40 yards once again versus the Giants, and I'm going to chalk up week one's dud to the rust of holding out paired with the bad matchup in division against the Giants. I think they just know how to limit him, and they also got up big pretty quickly. They didn't need to throw the ball like crazy. And there was also one deep pass for Terry that almost hit. It would have been a much better day had it connected. So I'm not going to overreact. I think last week was kind of predictable. And I think this week he will bounce back. Against the Packers, while they did look amazing on defense against Jared Goff, I'm not convinced they will completely shut down Jaden Daniels. There might be some turnovers, and I think they really limit the run game. However, I don't think they will completely stop Terry or Deebo for that matter. Deebo looked amazing in week one. A lot of usage, 10 targets for him. While Terry had a bad one, Deebo stepped up in a big way. He also had a 19-yard rushing touchdown. Love to see that for Deebo. I think the fat allegations were really misguided and went too far. If you were fading Deebo because of some pictures back in June, I think you made a big mistake. Deebo, I think, is going to be really, really valuable. As long as he stays healthy, I think he's locked into the top 30 every single week. That's where I ranked him entering the season. I was a Deebo believer, and I think I may have ranked him too low. I think as long as he's healthy, top 25 feels like the floor for Deebo in the rankings. I would start both Terry and Deebo in Washington this week on the road at Green Bay. I think the shootout potential is worth investing in. I want both in my lineup. At 21, I also think Davante Adams can stay in the lineup. Last week wasn't amazing, pretty mediocre to be honest. He also had some drops that were uncharacteristic, but the week one chemistry maybe wasn't the best. Stafford had missed some practice time, and Adams is a bit older. It's not like the Texans matchup was pretty good. So I'm willing to write that off. Even 7 points wasn't like unusable. It's not good, but Evans had 7.6 himself. There was a lot of receivers that really underperformed in week one. So it could have been worse. It definitely wasn't as bad as it could have been. And Adams, I think, will find the end zone pretty soon. Inevitably, he's going to be a target hog in the red zone. So I like the Rams offense to improve as the weeks go by. This Titans matchup, I don't think is that scary. And I think Adams will be a safe flex play at worst all season. I think he's a top 25 option. Similar to Deebo, touchdowns will be his calling card. Love Adams all year. At 22, I think a must start as a low-end number 2 receiver would be Jakobi Meyers. I think week one was extremely encouraging. I might be ranking Meyers too low, honestly. He had 10 targets in week one, 8 catches for 97 yards. It was a revenge game on the road at the Patriots, and Christian Gonzalez was unavailable. But I do not think this is a fluke. Meyers went over 1,000 yards last year, and other than Bowers, there's no real reliable target to really dominate in terms of looks from Geno. So I expect it to be a lot of Bowers, a lot of Meyers every single week. And 2 years ago, Jakobi scored 10 touchdowns. There's actually a lot of touchdown upside for him. He didn't score in week one, but don't be surprised if it happens pretty consistently this year. I think Jakobi is a very valuable asset. Last year he was a top 30 receiver. He gets a big quarterback upgrade this year, paired with Chip Kelly, a really legit play caller. I'm really excited about Jakobi Meyers. I think the floor is really safe. Amari Cooper retired. There's really no one I'm worried about to steal targets. And Geno Smith looked amazing. Geno threw for 362 yards against the Patriots, and he's also way better historically when he plays in a dome. The Raiders have a dome for a home stadium. So I love the upside for Geno. If you watch my waiver wire pickup video, I do have Geno as the most coveted quarterback pickup. I love the passing volume for the Raiders this year. I think Jakobi Meyers is going to be an extremely safe play, a consistent top 30 option every single week. And the Chargers matchup, I think, will work out for him. I think they will put up a good fight, and this one might be a shootout love Jakobi Meyers in week 2. At number 23, I have Zay Flowers versus Cleveland, and last week was exactly what we were waiting for when it comes to Flowers. We know he has that elite upside. He can go over 100 yards in any game. We've seen that before, but he also scored a touchdown. That play was really dynamic run after catch, and the question for Flowers, why I didn't rank him any higher, is can he do it again? The consistency was a major flaw in Flowers' game last year, and he's a pretty big boom-bust option until he proves that he can stay consistent. If he can do it all the time, then Flowers might be a top 10 receiver this year. If he goes double-digit touchdowns, he's not that far from that level of consistency. So I would not want to bench him this week. Last week was just so good. He had over 140 yards, and to pretend like the Ravens offense can't do that again would be lying to yourself. So love his usage. I also like that Andrews only had 1 target. If they can pivot all of the red zone looks that were originally going to Andrews over to Flowers, he's going to be such a valuable guy, but I can't pretend like I'm not a little worried that he completely burns you. If he puts up less than 20 yards in this game, that's also the other side of the coin with Flowers. It's very much a yo-yo type of trajectory for him. One week he's elite, the next week he completely burns you. I'm factoring in some risk, but week 1 was just so good. I think I have to trust him. He was the wide receiver 1 overall. I think you'd want to start him in week 2. So top 25 for me, that is a must start. I think at worst you're getting him in your lineup at the flex, and based on where you drafted him, maybe you have this year's steal of the draft. I doubt he's that consistent, but if he's top 15 almost all year, it wouldn't be that shocking. There is that level upside with Flowers. The Ravens score a lot of points. So love Flowers this week. I would start him. Cautiously optimistic that he doesn't shit the bed against Cleveland. At 24, I have Marvin Harrison Jr. versus Carolina, and he was good. I can't pretend like he wasn't. I didn't want to be pessimistic in week 1, so I did rank him top 30, and it did work out. He did show up pretty well, and a touchdown was pretty valuable. That's kind of the necessary piece, though, for Harrison. If you told me he didn't score a touchdown this week and he only got you like 7 points, that also wouldn't surprise me very much. He's still a gamble. I'm not going to pretend like I have gained full confidence in Harrison just after 1 good game against the Saints. But he gets Carolina this week. Maybe J.C. Horn does lock him up. I still have some reservations, but after putting up such a good game in week 1, he was a top 10 play. I think you have to start him, similar to Zay Flowers. While I'm not expecting elite numbers or any level of consistency, I think you should be starting him in week 2. This is the cutoff point for this tier. I think 12 points is definitely the expectation. I would be starting Marvin Harrison Jr. and every receiver I ranked above him. They're all in the top 24 for a reason. But now we're dropping down a tier, and these are still starts for me. I still believe that these are double-digit options in fantasy this week. Good flex plays I would be trying to get in the lineup, but there is just a little bit more risk, just 1 red flag too many, and that's why I don't think they're automatic starts. But at number 25, I think Ricky Pearsall is a very convincing plug into your lineup. If you have him, it's pretty hard to convince myself I need to bench him. But I'm a little bit worried about losing Brock Purdy. The pivot to Mac Jones didn't stop Brian Thomas Jr. last year, but Ricky Pearsall is not as talented as BTJ. So I just have to trust that Kyle Shanahan will get this offense rolling, but it's going to be a lot of McCaffrey, a lot of Brian Robinson Jr. But the fact that Kittle is also out, along with Juwan Jennings possibly missing the game as well, there's going to be enough volume for Pearsall, no matter what, to carry him over probably the 10-point threshold. Last week he scored 12.8, and it was pretty reliant on the big play. He only had 4 catches, but 108 yards. If you have that bonus, that's pretty nice. And if we look back to last year, when he does have a good game, it's a very, very good game. He usually finds the end zone when he goes over 40 yards. So I think he can probably score a touchdown this week. The Saints don't scare me. In general, I don't think it's a matchup to worry about. And Harrison had a good game. I think Pearsall is in line for another usable fantasy game. At least 10 points would be my expectation for Pearsall. So maybe Mac Jones holds him back, but other than McCaffrey, Pearsall is really the only weapon they have to catch passes. I think the volume will be high enough to bet on, but maybe the touchdown does not hit for the second week in a row. At 26, I got DeVonta Smith at the Chiefs, and to pretend like there are no red flags after week 1 would be a lie. The Eagles offense is kind of strange, but I do think they'll rely on the pass more this week. Justin Herbert threw all over them, and I could see Davante put up some big plays. I think he'll find the end zone. Last week was a really random game. I don't believe Jahan Dotson and Goddard are going to out-target both DeVonta Smith and A.J. Brown moving forward. But I do think A.J. Brown, after such a bad game, does get involved maybe at like a higher rate than normal, and perhaps that does eat into the production for Davante. If Goddard remains heavily involved, then one of these receivers is going to let you down every single week. So it could flip between A.J. Brown and Davante for that coveted touchdown, and there's still a lot of upside with Davante. I wouldn't fade him entirely, but I would kind of like to see what this offensive coordinator does in Philadelphia. I don't think we've pinned down what the offense is going to look like just yet in Philly. So watch out. There is some risk here, but based on talent alone in last year's production, I would still keep Davante in the top 30. Still a high-end flex play at the worst. Number 27, another high-end flex option was Jameson Williams versus Chicago, and I do have some red flags with the overall Lions offense. I think the offensive coordinator change, similar to DeVonta Smith, is a factor to monitor. Before we know exactly what the target share is going to look like, I am a little worried, not going to lie. Last week was really discouraging. Jared Goff looked like shit. So if he can't bounce back, if he's just really not the same player without Ben Johnson, there's just not enough touchdowns to go around in Detroit. And if Isaac Tesla is going to be vulturing them, then shit, how much do you really trust anyone in Detroit other than Gibbs? So he's in the flex conversation. There's a chance he really plummets down the rankings. There's some high variance with JMO, and he kind of relies on the big play as well. Those deep touchdowns are what gives him access to an elite ceiling. Without it, you could really struggle to hit 10 fantasy points. So there's some risk here, not going to lie, but the upside is still something I want to bet on. I don't want to completely give up on JMO just after 1 week. I think the Packers matchup is going to be a big downgrade for everyone. So JMO still top 30, but a little worried about it. And then at 28, I have DK Metcalf versus Seattle, who had a decent game. Rodgers looked good in week 1. He looked great, actually, threw for 4 touchdowns, but none of them went to Metcalf. So he still turned 4 catches into 83 yards, a bit reliant on the big play, but a safe floor. He gets a revenge game here against Seattle, and although generally that's a downgrade, I think odds are if he's going to score a touchdown this season, it probably happens against his former team. So I think that will carry you, but to pretend like I fully trust him against Devin Witherspoon, a team that knows him very well, I am a little worried that there could be a major bust game incoming from Metcalf. There's a chance he really shits the bed. The Seahawks defense is legit, so that's why I can't put him top 20. Even with the touchdown, I think he might be still a little limited, and the touchdown's no guarantee. There is a chance that this is a terrible outing for Metcalf. Witherspoon could definitely lock him up. Even Reek Woolen is a tough spot to go up against. So Metcalf, not in the top 25, but I think is a decent flex option in the top 30. And then at 29, I'm kind of drinking the Kool-Aid on Keon Coleman. I didn't overreact. He was top 5 in week 1. I have him at 29. But I do think there's a chance he is legitimately the number 1 receiver in Buffalo. They drafted him really high last year. He got injured right after he was starting to come alive. And Shakir has never elevated himself to the point where it's like unquestioned he's so much better than everyone else. So Coleman, the year 2 breakout, I think is absolutely a live bet to make. And at the moment, I could be ranking Keon literally like 10 spots too low. Week 1 was so impressive. 11 targets, 8 catches, 112 yards, and a touchdown. If he is the go-to option for Josh Allen, that could be a league winner. So love the upside for Coleman. I would like to see it one more time. And he does get the Jets. Maybe Sauce Gardner can shut him down. There's a chance that he totally burns you. There's a chance that week 1 was an absolute fluke. The fact that Shakir also had 9 targets, so did Josh Palmer, is maybe a reason why perhaps it will rotate in this receiving corps. Josh Allen does spread the ball around quite a bit. But beyond James Cook, there are no like elite difference maker playmakers on the Bills. They need some weapons they can trust. And I think Keon, based on draft capital, has a lot behind him. There's a lot of motivation to make him look like a good pick. So I think Keon has that upside we're looking for. Potential league winner if you drafted him. No doubt you're excited. So I'd be trying to start him, but at wide receiver 29, I get it if you don't have the space. I want to see it one more time. Last year, he was not consistent. not enough to trust. So give it one more week, but perhaps Keon is going to be a weekly top 25 play. Definitely an interesting bet this week against the Jets. At 30, I got Calvin Ridley versus the LA Rams, and this is going to be a home game for Cam Ward. I think he'll look way better than he did against Denver, but the Rams defense is no joke. They also made Stroud look like shit. They really held in check Nico Collins. So perhaps I'm overreacting to the Patrick Surtain matchup and expecting a big bounce back for Ridley is probably misguided. I'm pumping the brakes a little bit. He's only my wide receiver 30, but I really thought Cam Ward looked pretty good, and I do trust Ridley to be the top target in this offense. I think there's a chance there's a lot of garbage time. At home, I think this offense will put some points on the board. There will be some touchdowns in this game. So I do like Ridley rest of season, but I will acknowledge there's a chance that the Rams totally shut him down, and I'm willing to take that chance. I think the risk is worth the upside. The high ceiling outcome, I think, is really, really strong for Ridley with Ward this year. I think Ward is going to really look good. As the number one overall pick, he should look good. He was great in college last year. I think at some point things are going to click, and Ridley will be a great option. So maybe it starts in week 3, but I think in week 2, off the Pat Surtain game, he will step up. He had some drops which weren't encouraging, but other than Elik Ayamanor, there were really no targets that threatened Ridley for the top target share. So love Ridley's floor this season. I think he will really step up soon, and I will acknowledge maybe I'm over optimistic. I did just acquire him in my PPR league. I traded away Alvin Kamara straight up for Ridley. I'm actually really excited about that trade. I think that was the right call. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Should I have stayed with Kamara instead of getting Ridley? I think I made the right choice. I'm happy my trade proposal was accepted. At 31 and 32, I have both of the Bears receivers, Rome Odunze and DJ Moore, at Detroit. And while the Bears are still a losing team, the Ben Johnson effect was real. The first half looked really good for the Bears offense. Caleb looked a lot more decisive when the plays were scripted. So they're going to get the ball moving. I think against Detroit, it'll be an easier matchup than the Vikings was. And I think there's some legit high-end upside for both Bears receivers. I don't trust Burden yet, and Rome and DJ Moore are definitely the top targets. Rome scored the touchdown, but DJ Moore had the higher floor last week. I think similarly, 8.5 points is the bare minimum, and then there's some elite upside if touchdowns hit. DJ Moore almost connected on like a 40-yard touchdown right before the 2-minute warning. If Caleb didn't overthrow him, DJ Moore would have been an elite play last week. So I think both of them are very appealing in week 2. I think the Lions matchup is not a bad one at all. And I think Ben Johnson will have some extra motivation to get the win, or at least put up a good offensive game plan against his former team. So love Rome and DJ this week, but because Caleb didn't look amazing, still had some problems overall, I just can't bet with certainty that I'm starting the right one. The variance between the two is why I hold them back. There's a chance they're both top 20, but then there's also a chance that one of these guys totally burns you, and to guarantee which one that is a gamble. That's why I only have them at 31 and 32, but I have them above the black line. I do expect 10 plus points for both of them, and I do think you can start them with a decent level of confidence, but they're just flex plays, not elite wide receiver 2s this week. Just flex plays. The last ones, I'd be really trying to start in my lineup. Moving on, though, I think we're starting to bench these players, and I am a little concerned about this matchup for Tetairoa McMillan. The Arizona Cardinals, I think, have a really good corner on their hands. Rookie Will Johnson out of Michigan held Chris Olave to less than 8 yards per reception and only 7 catches on 13 targets. So Tet is going to need the volume to carry him over the line. I don't trust it. With Bryce Young kind of underperforming in week 1, perhaps this offense is not quite ready for primetime. So I don't fully trust Tet. I think the matchup is a downgrade, and I would like to see him score a touchdown before I lock him into my lineup every week. I think this matchup is one to avoid, and 8-9 points, I think, is the main expectation. Just like last week, nothing amazing, but also good enough where you're not losing just because of that performance. 9 points is fine. If it happens again, you'll be okay with it. So at 33, I think that's his floor. Fine, but nothing special. At 34, I got Stefon Diggs at Miami, and I want to believe that this Dolphins matchup is elite and will lead to a huge blowout victory for the Patriots. But Diggs was heavily targeted, but not the top target. He was out targeted by both Kayshon Boutte and Hunter Henry. So perhaps it was game plan specific. Maybe the Raiders tried to stop Diggs more than anyone else. He still put up 8.7, and that's definitely usable. That's fine if it repeats again, but not amazing. While I do think there's elite upside against Miami, there's not a guarantee that all of that production will go to Diggs and not someone else. So I'm really excited for this Patriots offense this week, but I don't think Diggs is like the safest bet overall. It could be Kayshon Boutte again, the one who goes over 100 yards. So there was a lot of passing volume in New England. I think that is a reason to be optimistic, but Diggs at 34 has a ceiling this week, but still not a very safe floor. I don't think I'm locked into starting him, but I would like to at least consider it. Number 35, I have Travis Hunter at Cincinnati, and Hunter looked decent like everyone in this game. I think the weather delay was a factor, but I like that he had a lot of volume. 8 targets, 6 catches was pretty nice, but it only turned into 33 yards. That needs to pick up. I think it will against the Bengals. The Panthers matchup is a little more difficult than Cincinnati. So this week, I think Trevor Lawrence is going to look good on the road. The Bengals will probably let this game turn into a shootout. And I think Hunter, from a volume standpoint, has a very high floor. I'm going to trust the matchup and volume to pay off with Hunter. But a little concerned, 33 yards on 6 catches is pretty mediocre. That needs to step up for me to keep ranking him in the top 35. But this week, I think based on matchup, I still have him as a low-end flex play. At 36, I have George Pickens versus the Giants, and the volume was pretty concerning for Pickens last week. He flashed some skill, but also cost them with a penalty. He also didn't commit to his routes when he knew he wasn't getting the ball. The tackle on Jake Ferguson in the end zone was partly due to Pickens not committing to his route. So there are some red flags with Pickens. I think the volume is really the main concern, but I do think against the Giants, there's a chance that at home, Dak Prescott scores a lot of touchdowns, and odds are one of them probably goes to Pickens. So he was targeted enough for me to still trust him, but I think all year long he'll be pretty touchdown dependent, and without it, you may get burned. 4.5 points last week was pretty bad, and I think that'll happen kind of often. I think if he's not scoring a touchdown, not giving you like 13 plus, there's a chance he doesn't score 5, and it will be kind of boom bust with Pickens. So let's wait and see. I'd like to see the volume tick up before I fully lock him in my lineup. At 37, 38, I have Jayden Reed and Matthew Golden, and last week Jayden Reed did score a touchdown, a bit of a shocker given his foot injury, but Matthew Golden kind of shit the bed, and I don't expect that to continue. I do think Golden is the guy you want on the season. I would expect Golden to be the best receiver in Green Bay, but interestingly, the most yards last week of all Packers receivers was Romeo Doubs, not either of these guys, so perhaps I'm ranking them incorrectly, but I think these are the only 2 I'm really considering in my lineup. Jayden Reed has elite upside, but also can really yo-yo, kind of like Zay Flowers, could put up a dud very easily the next week. And then Golden, I think at some point will pop, but after a bad game in week 1, you can't feel that excited to fully trust him. So until he proves it, he's not a top 30 option. At 38, he's okay, but a little too risky for my taste. I'm probably not starting either. And even with the touchdown, Jayden Reed only had 12 points. That wasn't like elite by any stretch. So neither of them is a safe enough play to be locked into your lineup, but they both have high upside. I think against Washington, it could turn into a shootout. At 37, 38, I'm thinking about it, but I'm probably not starting either Packers receiver. At 39, I have Khalil Shakir at the Jets, and he had that 9-point floor we were accustomed to. Last year, he was pretty bust-proof because of the volume, but he was never elite. There was never like amazing high-end ceiling production out of Shakir. He was just a steady, consistent floor play. And this week, I don't think that's like the main attraction, what you're dying to acquire in your lineup. So while you could start him and feel fine about it, I could rank him 7, 10 spots higher and make an argument that should be the case. But similar to guys like Tetairoa McMillan, Stefon Diggs in the same tier, I think it's just a bit mediocre. The ceiling feels a bit capped. And if all you're trying to do is just avoid a bagel and bank 9 points, then go ahead and start Shakir. That's a safe bet. But I think right now the bet to be making for real upside is Keon Coleman in Buffalo. So Shakir will pump the brakes at wide receiver 39. This is still higher than where he was being drafted coming into the season. So decent option, just low ceiling, high floor safe play, just not exciting to put in the lineup. At 40 and 41, I have Quentin Johnston and Keenan Allen at Las Vegas, and I have them back-to-back with QJ as the better option. I think the Brazil travel is a major factor in this game. Not only are they coming back to the United States, they're also traveling to Las Vegas. It's not a long road trip, but still it's not at home, and I think the fatigue might set in for the 33-year-old Keenan Allen. So even though Quentin Johnston isn't the safest bet, he looked really good in week 1. If he doesn't drop passes, he can turn anything into a big play, and he scored 2 touchdowns. Last year, he was the highest scoring receiver in that department as well. He had 8 touchdowns. Ladd had 7. So QJ is not going to disappear. QJ is still a first-round talent at the end of the day, and although everyone writes him off, I think he's still a big contributor in this offense. People forget about him a lot. So do opposing defenses. So he's decent. I think the upside is absolutely there. Last week he had 22 fantasy points. And Keenan also found the end zone, actually had more targets than anyone in LA, but he kind of looked old. There were a lot of plays where Keenan didn't look very good. He also had some drops. And if the Chiefs didn't let him get wide open on a few of those plays, I don't think he would have had a very good fantasy game at all. So I'm not fully believing that Keenan is a must start. I also think off the Brazil travel, the 33-year-old will look tired. And that's why if I'm shooting for upside, I'd rather go QJ over Keenan in week 2. I think against the Raiders, it could turn into a shootout. I'm obviously trusting McConkey, but if I'm starting a second Chargers receiver, personally, I'm going with Quentin Johnston. I think Keenan might fall off a cliff in this matchup. I think he will not look the same. And I'm worried about his long-term injury risk. I think Quentin Johnston is actually very valuable long-term. If Keenan goes down, he's locked in to a lot of targets. At 42, I have Darnell Mooney at Minnesota, and reportedly he's off the injury report. Mooney will play on Sunday, so maybe he's limited in practice later in the week and the questionable tag does come back, but right now I'm going to trust that the ESPN news is correct. He's labeled as healthy, and Penix looked good. This offense needs pass catchers. Pitts is not the answer. And right now, Drake London is also questionable with a shoulder injury. So maybe Mooney is going to be forced into the fire immediately. There's a chance he might have 10 plus targets. If London is unavailable, Mooney would be a must start. Mooney would be a top 20 play if London can't go. But even if London is healthy, I still think Mooney has very high upside. Last year, he had a lot of top 30 performances. He gets a quarterback upgrade with Penix compared to Cousins. So love Mooney. I think once he's fully healthy, I will be ranking him in the top 30 pretty often. I think Penix gives him an elite ceiling every week. But beyond wide receiver 42, I think at this point you're definitely benching these guys. I'm going to kind of go fast because I just don't believe they're good plays. Judy wasn't the clear number 1 target in Cleveland, and against Baltimore, it's a much more difficult matchup. I don't trust touchdowns to hit. I don't think he's that much better than any other Browns receiver. I could argue Fannin looked better. Cedric Tillman scored the touchdown. It's going to be random in Cleveland. There aren't many touchdowns to go around in the first place. So no thanks with Judy. I didn't like him entering the season. I don't think he's top 40. And same goes with Olave. Olave had 13 targets. And while that's definitely really encouraging, same happened for JSN. He only caught 7 of them for 54 yards. That's terrible and really low efficiency. I have no desire to trust Spencer Rattler. I think Olave against the Niners is going to get locked up. I'm definitely benching Judy and Olave. I think they will struggle to surpass 10 points all year. No thanks with either of them. At 45, I have Kayshon Boutte at Miami, and last week was pretty good. Over 100 yards, had the most targets of any Patriots receiver, and Drake May threw the ball like crazy. There's a chance this game turns into a blowout victory. Daniel Jones just torched the Dolphins in week 1, so Drake May could definitely do it in week 2. There's a chance that Boutte is actually the most reliable fantasy play in New England other than Travion Henderson. I like Boutte's upside a lot. So pick him up. I would roster him. The blowout potential against the Dolphins is pretty interesting, but I'm probably keeping him on the bench. Don't think I'm going to start him. And speaking of this Dolphins game, I'm benching both Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. I have no faith in Tua. I have no faith in Mike McDaniel anymore. And overall, I think the Dolphins have already quit on the season. So until Tyreek Hill gets traded, I don't think the target share will be high enough for either player to trust. It's just spread around too much, and Tua looks really figured out. I think Tua is going to look like shit once again. I am not starting a single Dolphin other than A-Chain, and even that kind of feels risky. So no thanks. I'm a big hater. I was fading the Dolphins all summer. I'm going to keep staying to that opinion. I'm not changing my mind. Bench Tyreek Hill, bench Jalen Waddle until Tyreek is traded. No one has value other than A-Chain. At 48, I have Michael Pittman Jr. versus Denver. A great game from him in week 1, but speaking of the Dolphins, that's why I don't believe it'll repeat. This week, he gets Denver, and Patrick Surtain is a big wake-up call for Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones will look like shit against the Broncos. Week 1 was a fluke, and Pittman may bounce back after the Broncos matchup, but I'm not starting him. Not going to press my luck against PS2. Definitely bench Michael Pittman. Just like Calvin Ridley last week, do not test Patrick Surtain. At 49, we got Cedric Tillman at Baltimore, who did find the end zone. That was encouraging, especially for my best ball shares. But just like Jerry Jeudy, I don't really trust either Browns receiver, and it looks like Harold Fannin might actually be the most valuable option overall in Cleveland. So I don't want to start him. It's just too much of a gamble, but against the Ravens, there will be garbage time. There's a chance he finds the end zone again. It's just pretty random to bet on, and it will go to somebody else, most likely. So no thanks with Tillman, but is a top 50 receiver. Definitely someone I would like to roster if available on the waiver wire. I would pick him up. And then at 50, I got Romeo Doubs, who from just yardage standpoint was better than both Jaden Reed and Matthew Golden last week. Jaden Reed found the end zone, though, and Doubs is pretty touchdown dependent. Even if he does have the most yards again, that didn't give you more than 8 points in week 1. So not going to bet on it. The Commanders, I think, will put up a good fight, and odds are at some point Matthew Golden will emerge as the clear go-to option. No thanks with Romeo Doubs. But 51, no thanks with Wan'Dale Robinson. He's questionable, did not practice today, but odds are he's going to be fine, and odds are he's going to give you an 7-8 point floor every week. That's just exactly what he does. He never scores touchdowns. He never goes over 10 points, and it's just really like, you know you're not getting a bagel. That's really the only reason to start Wan'Dale. He's more valuable in full PPR, but these are half PPR rankings. At 51, I don't think I'm going to start him. It's just not exciting to do. And 8.5 points is kind of the best case scenario most of the time. Juju Smith-Schuster, also kind of a sneaky, interesting play, but just like Wan'Dale, I think probably just an 8-point floor most likely, and I'm probably not going to bet on it. But there is a chance that the Eagles really lock up Hollywood Brown, and Juju has to step up. I don't expect 35-year-old Travis Kelce to actually be that involved this season. So Juju has some interesting, sneaky appeal. Off the wire, I might consider adding him, but I don't think I'm going to start him. I need to see it happen one more time. Right now, Hollywood is the only one I would trust in Kansas City. But beyond this point, these guys did not really put up much in week 1, but I think all should be rostered. These are my top 62 players that you can't start yet, but definitely have league-winning upside rest of the season. I think they should be on rosters overall. Jaden Higgins, my boy in the preseason, not the best start to the year, but was actually the leading receiver in Houston week 1. Obviously, Nico's the guy you want, but Higgins will inevitably figure things out. He will pop sooner or later. So don't cut him. Definitely do not drop Jaden Higgins. I also think Elic Ayamanor in Tennessee needs to be picked up off the waiver wire. 7 targets, only 2 catches, but against Denver, things will improve for Cam Ward. Ayamanor is going to be the number 2 target in Tennessee, and Ward will keep that position valuable. Ridley's also 30 years old. Ayamanor has a lot of upside if Ridley goes down. Ayamanor, one of my favorite pickups off the wire in week 1. Still just a bench stash, but really high upside as the weeks go by. Troy Franklin, I think, does get a bump with Evan Ingram dealing with an injury. He had 4 targets, decent production, 44 yards on 4 catches in week 1. And against the Colts, maybe that continues to improve. I think his chemistry from college with Bo Nix will start to look evident. I'd rather have Franklin as of today than Marvin Mims. Josh Palmer, I might be ranking way too low. He had 9 targets in Buffalo last week. That's the same as Shakir, but I'd like to see it one more time. He didn't find the end zone. He wasn't really efficient, and he has let me down in the Chargers offense in the past, but does have some value. Anyone playing with Josh Allen can have a very high-scoring game. Worth rostering, that is for sure. 57, I would also still roster Rashid Shaheed. He had the same stat line as Travis Hunter, who I am ranking 20 spots higher. So it's mainly the matchup why I trust Travis Hunter this week. Shaheed gets the Niners, and the quarterback situation is also a factor. But if you told me Olave ever went down, Shaheed would dominate in targets, and at some point I do think he'll break open some deep plays. There is some deep threat potential for Shaheed. Maybe not league-winning potential, but still should be rostered. Decent depth with Shaheed. I'm not starting him, though, against the Niners. At 58, I'm not starting Demario Douglas at Miami. He had negative yardage, but also scored a touchdown week 1. And the Dolphins matchup is really the only encouraging thing. But in general, I view him a lot like Wan'Dale Robinson. You're rarely getting anything more than 10 points, but rarely ever getting less than 7. 59, I'll still hold off on Josh Downs versus the Broncos. Looked pretty bad week 1. I think it'll take him some time to have good chemistry with Daniel Jones. He missed a lot of practice in the preseason with an injury. He's still shaking off some rust. Downs can't be dropped, but can't be started at this point in time. Rashad Bateman, also too risky to start, but has elite upside any week, could hit a deep touchdown. And we saw the upside for Flowers last year. Bateman scored 9 touchdowns. Flower only scored 4. Maybe it pivots and flips this year, but at some point Bateman will find the end zone. In the Ravens offense, there is value, undoubtedly. And then 61 and 62, I do have Calvin Austin and De'Ami Brown, deep threats in their respective offenses. Need a touchdown. It hit for Austin last week, and De'Ami did have 7 points as well. But in general, I just don't feel safe enough to bet on them. Outliers, but maybe worth rostering for the sake of depth. So those are my rankings this week. At receiver, I have the top 62 here on the screen, and definitely locking in the top 12 in my lineup. Those guys are all expected to give me at least 12, 15 plus points. You can never bench any of those players. I think they've earned your trust. Following week 1, I would still start them no matter what. But 13 through 24, I think, are also in your lineup basically no matter what, but there are some red flags, some concerns to have, but also a lot of reasons to be expecting big games, and generally, more often than not, also expecting touchdowns. Touchdowns are really the name of the game at the receiver position. If you can guarantee a touchdown, you pretty much guarantee 10 plus points, and you have a good play that week at the position. So those are the guys I think are better bets to give you that high-end floor. The touchdown should put them over the 12-point threshold. But I also think the best flex plays are the top 32. Ricky Pearsall at 25, all the way through DJ Moore at 32. I'd be trying to get into the lineup, but perhaps you have a very deep roster. Perhaps it's a bit too crowded for them to fit. But while I am still trusting them, there is like one level of concern. There is a chance that maybe the Mac Jones situation in San Francisco is bad for Ricky Pearsall. Maybe Jalen Hurts really doesn't throw it that much. Maybe Jared Goff is really that bad. Maybe the Seahawks locked down DK Metcalf. Maybe Keon week 1 was a fluke. Maybe Ridley has another bad matchup week 2 versus the Rams. And maybe Rome and DJ Moore just can't be trusted because Caleb also can't be trusted. But I do see a lot of upside for those guys. I think those are the best flex options overall, the guys I'd be trying to start if I can. But starting with Tetairoa McMillan, I think there's a little bit too much risk, whether it's the matchup or just the production from week 1 not being enough. There is a chance that all of these guys from 33 to 42 burn you, but they also still have some touchdown upside as well. There is also a chance that they are phenomenal starts. I still like them, but I just don't think I'm going to start them in week 2. I think I can find a better option, more likely than not. So in deeper formats, go for it, but in a regular 10-12 league, I'd probably pass. And then starting with Jerry Jeudy, that's definitely the point where no thank you, but I would still keep them on the bench. I would not be cutting anyone I rank in the top 62. And if they're still on the waiver wire, I would pick them up if you need the receiving depth, especially guys like Elik Ayamanor, Quentin Johnston, Cedric Tillman as well. Even Kayshon Boutte, I think, has legit value this week. So good luck to you. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. I will see you next time. My name is Adam Riancho. Thank you for watching. Nice and blunt.